Clara Whitfield's fingers were turning blue when she stopped clawing at the frozen ground. Blood from her shoulder stained the snow crimson. The stagecoach had vanished into the blizzard an hour ago, and she'd stopped screaming for help 30 minutes after that. 28 years old, and she was going to die alone in Wyoming territory, 3,000 miles from anyone who'd ever loved her. Then she heard hoofbeats. If you want to see how Clara's story ends, subscribe to my channel, follow her journey to the very last word, and comment which city you're watching from. Let me see how far this story travels. The stagecoach lurched violently, and Clara Whitfield grabbed the seat with her good hand. Her right arm had been throbbing since yesterday's accident at the relay station when a spooked horse had knocked her against the stable wall. She'd heard something crack. She'd felt something shift wrong beneath her skin. But she hadn't said a word to anyone, because stopping meant spending money she didn't have. "Copper Springs ahead!" the driver hollered through the howling wind. "Last stop before the mountains close for winter." Clara pressed her face to the frost-covered window. Through the swirling snow, she could barely make out the shapes of buildings. Her uncle's letter was tucked inside her dress, against her heart, worn soft from months of reading and rereading. "Come west, Clara. I've got a bookshop that needs a steady hand. You're the only family I have left, and I'm getting old. The shop will be yours someday." Uncle Thomas, her mother's brother, the only person in the world who shared her blood. The stage shuddered to a stop, and the door swung open. Cold air hit Clara like a fist. She gathered her single carpet bag and stepped down into 6 inches of snow, cradling her injured arm against her chest. "You sure this is where you're headed, miss?" The driver was already unhitching the horses, eager to get them to shelter. "Ain't much of a town." "I'm sure. My uncle owns the bookshop here, Thomas Whitfield." The driver's hands paused on the harness. He didn't look at her. "Ma'am, I don't know how to tell you this." Clara's stomach dropped. "Tell me what—" "Thomas Whitfield died 2 months back. Typhoid took him quick. I'm sorry." The words didn't make sense. Clara stood frozen, the snow settling on her shoulders, her injured arm screaming with every heartbeat. "That's not possible. I received his letter in September. He was fine." "Typhoid don't care about letters, miss." The driver finally met her eyes, and she saw genuine sympathy there. "The shop got sold off to cover his debts. Man named Hargrove bought it. Turned it into a feed store, I heard." Clara couldn't breathe. The cold was inside her now, spreading through her chest. Where is he buried?" "Cemetery's up the hill past the church. Can't miss it." He hesitated. "You got somewhere to stay, miss? Someone expecting you?" "I'll manage." She didn't know how. She didn't know anything anymore. But she said the words anyway because that's what she'd always done. Managed. Survived. Kept moving when everything fell apart. The driver climbed back onto his seat. "Good luck to you, miss. You're gonna need it." The stagecoach pulled away, leaving Clara alone in the center of Copper Springs' main street. Snow was falling harder now. Thick white curtains that obscured everything more than 20 feet away. She made herself walk, 1 foot in front of the other, past a general store with its windows dark. Past a saloon where piano music and laughter spilled into the cold. Past a blacksmith's forge, quiet and empty. The cemetery was exactly where the driver said it would be. Clara pushed through the iron gate with her good shoulder, her boots crunching through the snow. She found the grave in the back corner. A simple wooden marker already weathering. Thomas Whitfield, 1824 to 1882. Rest in peace. Clara sank to her knees in the snow. She didn't cry. She was too cold for tears, too shocked for grief. She just knelt there staring at the name of the last person in the world who had wanted her. "I came," she whispered. "I came as fast as I could." The wind stole her words and scattered them across the frozen ground. Clara didn't know how long she knelt there. Long enough for the snow to pile up around her skirts. long enough for her injured arm to go from agony to a strange, terrifying numbness. Finally, she forced herself to stand. She had to find shelter. She had to think. The hotel was easy to find, a two-story building with a hand-painted sign that read, "O'Brien's Boarding House," swinging in the wind. Clara pushed through the door and was hit by a wave of warmth that made her gasp. A woman behind the counter looked up from her ledger. She was perhaps 50, with graying red hair pinned back severely and sharp eyes that assessed Clara in a single glance. "Help you. I need a room, just for tonight while I figure out my situation. $1 a night, $2 with meals." Clara's fingers were stiff with cold as she opened her reticule. She had exactly $7.32 to her name. Everything else had gone toward the stage ticket from Philadelphia. "1 night with meals, please." The woman, Mrs. O'Brien, presumably took her money and slid a key across the counter. Then her eyes narrowed. "What happened to your arm?" Clara glanced down. Her right arm hung at an odd angle, and even through her dress sleeve she could see the swelling. In the warmth of the boarding house, the pain was returning with vicious intensity. "Accident at a relay station. A horse. That needs looking at. You see Doc Chen yet?" "I just arrived. I'll manage." "You'll manage yourself into losing that arm is what you'll do." Mrs. O'Brien shook her head. "Doc's office is 3 doors down. Tell him Maggie sent you. He'll put it on my tab for now." "I couldn't possibly." "Wasn't asking." The woman's voice was gruff, but her eyes had softened slightly. "You're Thomas Whitfield's niece, ain't you? He talked about you, said you were coming to help with the shop. You knew my uncle." Everyone knew Tom. Good man, terrible card player, but good. Maggie leaned on the counter. "I'm sorry about what happened. He went fast at least, didn't suffer long." Clara's throat tightened. "Thank you for telling me that. Now go see Doc Chen before you collapse in my lobby. Room's upstairs, second door on the left. I'll have someone bring up hot water and a meal." The doctor's office was small but clean, with a wood stove burning in the corner that made Clara nearly weep with relief. Her bones had felt frozen solid since stepping off the stage. The man who emerged from the back room was not what she'd expected. He was Chinese, perhaps 40 years old, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles and hands that moved with practiced precision. "I'm Dr. Chen. Maggie sent word you were coming." He pulled a chair close to the stove. "Sit, please. Let me see the arm." Clara obeyed, too exhausted to protest. Dr. Chen's examination was gentle but thorough. When he manipulated her elbow, she couldn't stop the cry of pain that escaped her lips. "Dislocated," he said quietly. "The joint slipped out of place and has been sitting wrong for at least a day. Yes, since yesterday afternoon. The longer it stays wrong, the harder it becomes to fix." He met her eyes. "I need to put it back in place. It will hurt considerably, but if I don't, you may lose the use of the arm." Clara swallowed. "Do what you have to do. I'll give you something for the pain first. Laudanum. It will make you drowsy, but it will help." He measured out a dose and watched while she drank it. The liquid was bitter, but within minutes, Clara felt her muscles begin to relax, the sharp edges of her pain softening to something more bearable. "Now," Dr. Chen said, positioning himself at her side. "I'm going to count to 3. Ready?" Clara nodded. 1. He moved before she could brace herself, manipulating the joint with swift, certain pressure. There was a grinding sensation, a flash of blinding pain, and then relief. The arm was still tender, still swollen, but she could feel immediately that something fundamental had been corrected. "Good," Dr. Chen said. "Very good. The joint is back in place." He began binding her arm to her chest with strips of clean cloth. "You'll need to keep it immobile for at least 3 weeks. The ligaments were badly strained. If you don't let them heal, the joint will continue to slip." 3 weeks. Clara's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I can't. I don't have anywhere to stay for 3 weeks. I don't have money for 3 weeks. Dr. Chen's hands paused in their work. Mrs. O'Brien mentioned your situation. I'm sorry about your uncle. Thank you. Do you have any other family? Anyone you can contact? No, no one. The admission hollowed her out. She was 28 years old, 3,000 miles from the city where she'd grown up, and there was not a single person on Earth who would notice if she disappeared. Dr. Chen finished binding her arm. You should rest. The laudanum will make you sleep, which is the best thing for healing. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. How much do I owe you? Nothing tonight. Maggie's tab, remember. He helped her to her feet. Can you make it back to the boarding house? I can manage. Clara stepped out into the cold, but the snow had stopped falling while she was inside. The sky was clearing, revealing the first stars of evening. She stood for a moment looking up at them, wondering if these were the same stars that shone over Philadelphia, over her parents' graves, over everything she'd lost. Then she started walking. The next morning, Clara woke to watery sunlight streaming through a frost-covered window and the immediate realization that her situation had not improved overnight. She dressed awkwardly with one arm, managed to pin her hair into something presentable, and went downstairs to find Mrs. O'Brien serving breakfast to a handful of other lodgers. There she is. Maggie set a plate of eggs and biscuits in front of an empty chair. Sit, eat. You look like death warmed over. Clara sat. She wasn't hungry, but she ate anyway because she'd learned long ago that you couldn't think clearly on an empty stomach. I wanted to thank you, she said between bites, for last night, for sending me to Dr. Chen. Couldn't have you dying in my establishment. Bad for business. But Maggie's eyes were kind. How's the arm? Better. Still sore, but better. Good. Maggie refilled Clara's coffee cup. Now, what are you planning to do with yourself? It was the question Clara had been avoiding since she'd learned of her uncle's death. She had no skills that were useful in a frontier town. She could read and write beautifully, could manage accounts and bind books, could quote Shakespeare and discuss philosophy. But none of that would feed her or keep a roof over her head in Copper Springs, Wyoming. I don't know yet. Well, you'd better figure it out quick. I can give you a few days on credit, but this ain't a charity house. I understand. Clara finished her breakfast and stepped outside, determined to explore the town and find some opportunity, any opportunity. The morning was bitterly cold but clear. Copper Springs looked different in daylight, smaller than she'd imagined, rougher. A main street of wooden buildings, a few side streets with modest houses, and beyond that, endless white plains stretching to distant mountains. She walked the length of the main street twice, noting every business. General store, saloon, blacksmith. Feed store, the building that had once been her uncle's bookshop, the sign still visible beneath a layer of new paint. Church, schoolhouse, though it looked abandoned. Doctor's office. Harness maker. And at the end of the street, a large, well-built structure with a sign reading Hargrove Cattle Company. The name made her stop. Hargrove, the man who'd bought her uncle's shop. She didn't know what made her push through the door. Curiosity, perhaps, or some desperate hope that there might be work here even for a woman with a bound arm and no practical skills. The interior was warm and well-appointed leather chairs, a large desk maps of the territory covering the walls. A man sat behind the desk, tall and thin, with silver hair and pale blue eyes that reminded Clara of frozen water. Help you. His voice was cultured, educated, not what she'd expected from a frontier cattle baron. I'm Clara Whitfield, Thomas Whitfield's niece. The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those cold eyes. Ah, the niece from Philadelphia. Tom mentioned you. He stood and extended his hand. Silas Hargrove, I'm sorry for your loss. Clara didn't take his hand. You bought my uncle's shop. I purchased his debts, which included the shop as collateral. Business, Miss Whitfield. Nothing personal. He withdrew his hand, seemingly unbothered by her rejection. Tom was a good man, but a poor businessman. He owed money to half the town when he died. I consolidated those debts and took possession of his assets, as was my right." "How convenient for you." Silas smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I prefer to think of it as efficient. The shop was worthless as a bookshop. Nobody in this town reads, but it makes a decent feed store." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Miss Whitfield. You look exhausted." Clara remained standing. "I'm fine." "You're injured alone and presumably nearly destitute. Fine seems optimistic." He leaned back in his chair. "What are your plans?" "I haven't decided yet." "Well, when you do come see me, I can always use someone with education and breeding. Bookkeeping, correspondence, that sort of thing. The pay is fair and the work is clean." "I'll keep that in mind." Clara turned to leave, but Silas's voice stopped her. "Miss Whitfield, a word of advice free of charge." He was still smiling that cold smile. "Be careful who you associate with in this town. Not everyone is what they seem. Some people here are undesirable. It would be a shame for a respectable woman like yourself to damage her reputation through poor choices." Clara didn't ask what he meant. She didn't want to know. She simply nodded and walked out into the cold. The rest of the day passed in a blur of dead ends. The general store wasn't hiring, the saloon wanted entertainment, and the owner's leer made Clara's skin crawl. The blacksmith had no use for a woman, especially one with an injured arm. Every door she knocked on, every person she approached, gave her the same answer: no work, no opportunities, no hope. By afternoon, Clara was exhausted, frozen, and dangerously close to despair. She found herself standing outside the church, staring up at the simple wooden cross on its steeple, wondering if God had any interest in her prayers. "You look lost." The voice came from behind her. Clara turned to find a woman perhaps 10 years older than herself, wrapped in a heavy shawl, carrying a basket of what looked like medical supplies. "I'm looking for work," Clara said. "Any work." "Aren't we all?" The woman smiled, and it transformed her tired face into something warm. "I'm Hannah Lee. I help Doc Chen at his office." "Clara Whitfield." "Tom's niece, I know. Whole town's been talking." Hannah shifted her basket. "Word of advice, don't take anything Silas Hargrove offers you. The man's poison wrapped in silk." "I gathered as much." "Smart girl." Hannah studied her for a moment. "The arm's bothering you. I can see it in your face." "It's healing." "It needs rest, not a day of walking around in the cold." Hannah made a decision. "Come with me. Doc Chen's office is warm and I've got tea. You can sit for a spell while I organize his supplies, and maybe we can figure out what to do with you." Clara hesitated. She'd learned to be wary of kindness. It usually came with conditions. But Hannah's face was open, her offer seemed genuine, and Clara was cold down to her bones. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." Dr. Chen's office was indeed warm, and the tea Hannah brewed was strong and sweet. Clara sat by the stove, feeling the heat slowly penetrate her frozen limbs, while Hannah moved around the small space organizing bottles and bandages. "So," Hannah said without looking up from her work, "what skills do you have?" "I was a bookbinder in Philadelphia. I can read, write, and keep accounts. I can cook adequately and maintain a household." Clara laughed bitterly. "None of which seem to be in demand here." "You'd be surprised. Most folks in town can barely write their own names." Hannah placed a bottle on a shelf. "The school's been closed for 2 years. Teacher ran off with a traveling salesman and nobody's replaced her." "I noticed the building looked abandoned." "Town can't afford a proper teacher. Hargrove controls most of the money, and he doesn't see the point in educating what he calls sheep." Hannah's voice was flat with old anger. "The man owns half the town and wants to own the other half." "He offered me work." Hannah turned to face her. "Don't take it. Whatever he's offering, it'll cost you more than it's worth." "I don't have many options." "There's always options. Some are just harder than others." Hannah leaned against the counter. "Listen, there's a man who ranches outside of town. Eli Dawson. He's looking for someone to teach his nephew boys bright as anything, but never had proper schooling. It wouldn't be much room board and a small wage, but it would keep you fed and sheltered while you figure things out. Why doesn't this Eli Dawson come to town himself to find a teacher? Hannah's expression became careful. Eli's not welcome in town, not by everyone. Why not? Because he's not white. The words hung in the air between them. Clara understood immediately. She'd seen the segregation in Philadelphia, the invisible lines that divided people based on the color of their skin. She'd witnessed the hatred and the violence that lurked beneath polite society's surface. I see. Do you... Hannah's eyes were sharp. Because if you go out there, you'll be associating with him, working for him, living under his roof. Some folks in town won't take kindly to that. Some folks in town won't give me work because I'm a woman with no husband and no connections. I'm already unacceptable by their standards. Hannah smiled slowly. I think I like you, Clara Whitfield. How do I get to this Eli Dawson's ranch? You don't. Not in your condition and not in this weather. But Eli comes to town every Thursday to trade for supplies. That's tomorrow. I can introduce you if you're willing. Tomorrow. Clara could manage one more day. She still had enough money for one more night at the boarding house. I'm willing. That evening, Clara returned to O'Brien's boarding house to find Maggie waiting for her with a troubled expression. You've got a visitor, Maggie said quietly. In the parlor. I tried to turn him away, but he insisted. Who? Silas Hargrove. Clara's stomach tightened. What does he want? Didn't say. But Clara... Maggie lowered her voice. Be careful. That man doesn't do anything without a reason, and his reasons are rarely good. Clara squared her shoulders and walked into the small parlor. Silas stood by the window looking out at the snow-covered street. He turned when she entered, and his smile was the same as before, polished and cold. Miss Whitfield, thank you for seeing me. I wasn't aware I had a choice. There's always a choice. Some are simply wiser than others. He gestured to a chair. Please, sit. I prefer to stand. What do you want, Mr. Hargrove? Direct. I appreciate that. He clasped his hands behind his back. I've done some asking around about you today. Your uncle's niece, yes, but more than that. Educated. Trained in bookkeeping and business management. A woman of quality stranded in a town that has no use for quality. Get to the point. I'm offering you a position. Not as a clerk or a bookkeeper, that was my initial thought, but I've reconsidered. I need someone to manage my household. I'm a widower, Miss Whitfield. My wife passed 3 years ago, and since then my home has lacked a woman's touch. I'm offering room board and a generous salary in exchange for your services. My services? Household management, correspondence, perhaps some light bookkeeping. His smile widened slightly. Nothing improper, I assure you. I'm a man of business, not passion. Clara felt her skin crawl. There was something beneath his words, something she couldn't quite name, but instinctively distrusted. I'll consider your offer. Don't consider too long. I'm a patient man, but winter is not. In a few weeks the passes will close, and you'll be trapped here until spring with no money and no prospects. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. I've heard you've been asking about work around town. I'd advise you to stop. People talk, and a woman asking too many questions attracts the wrong kind of attention. Is that a threat, Mr. Hargrove? It's advice. Take it or leave it. He tipped his hat. Good evening, Miss Whitfield. After he'd gone, Clara stood in the empty parlor, her heart pounding. Something was very wrong in this town. She could feel it like a current running beneath the surface tensions, divisions, secrets. And Silas Hargrove was at the center of it. Tomorrow, she would meet this Eli Dawson. Tomorrow, she would find another option, any option that didn't involve putting herself under Hargrove's power. But tonight, she would sleep. Her arm was aching, and her body was exhausted, and whatever came next, she would need her strength. Clara climbed the stairs to her small room, locked the door behind her, and lay down on the narrow bed. Through the window she could see the stars again, cold and distant above the frozen landscape. She was alone. She was injured. She was running out of money and options. But she was still alive, and she was still fighting, and tomorrow was another day. Thursday morning dawned clear and bitter cold. Clara dressed carefully, choosing her warmest dress and pinning her hair with extra care. First impressions mattered especially when you were asking a stranger for help. She found Hannah waiting for her outside Dr. Chen's office just after 9 o'clock. "He'll be at the general store soon," Hannah said, falling into step beside Clara. "Eli always comes early before the town gets busy. Less trouble that way." "Does he face much trouble?" "Used to be worse. There was a time when he couldn't walk down the street without someone spitting at him or worse. It's calmed down some in recent years, but there's still folks who can't stand the sight of him. Because of his race. Because of his race, his land, and his stubbornness." Hannah smiled grimly. "Eli owns property that Hargrove wants. Good land with water rights. Hargrove's been trying to buy him out for years and Eli won't sell. That's an unforgivable sin in Silas Hargrove's book." They reached the general store and Hannah nodded toward a wagon hitched outside. "That's his. He's inside." Clara took a breath and pushed through the door. The general store was warm and crowded with goods barrels of flour and sugar, shelves of canned goods tools hanging from hooks on the walls. A man stood at the counter with his back to her, discussing an order with the shopkeeper. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat dusted with snow. When he turned at the sound of the door, Clara found herself looking into a face that was handsome and weathered with gray eyes that assessed her quickly and thoroughly. He was perhaps in his mid-30s. His skin was the color of coffee with cream, his dark hair cropped close. There were lines around his eyes and mouth that spoke of both laughter and hardship. "Mr. Dawson." "That's right." His voice was deep, cautious. "Do I know you?" "My name is Clara Whitfield. Hannah Lee told me you might be looking for someone to teach your nephew." The shopkeeper behind the counter was watching them with barely concealed hostility. Eli noticed and set his jaw. "Outside," he said shortly. "We can talk outside." Clara followed him into the cold. He walked to his wagon and leaned against it, crossing his arms over his chest. Up close, she could see how tired he looked, how guarded. "Hannah sent you. She mentioned that your nephew needs a teacher and I need work. You know what you'd be getting into? Working for me? I know what people in this town think of you. I know staying at your ranch would damage my reputation. And you don't care." Clara laughed, and the sound was bitter even to her own ears. "Mr. Dawson, my reputation was damaged the moment I stepped off that stage with no money and no husband. I'm already a subject of gossip and speculation. Working for you can hardly make things worse." Something shifted in Eli's expression. "Hannah told me about your situation, your uncle dying, Hargrove taking the shop. Did she tell you he offered me a position as his housekeeper?" "Did she?" Eli's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I said I'd consider it, but I have no intention of accepting. The man makes my skin crawl." Eli was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if searching for something. Clara stood still under his scrutiny, refusing to look away. "My nephew's name is Isaiah," he said finally. "He's 14. His mother, my sister, died 3 years ago. I've done what I can with his education, but he deserves better than what I can give him. He's smart, hungry to learn, reads everything he can get his hands on." "What happened to his father?" "Never knew him. My sister made choices that weren't popular." A muscle twitched in Eli's jaw. "Isaiah's paid for those choices his whole life. People look at him and see—" He stopped, shook his head. "You know what they see." "I know." "So here's my offer. Room and board plus $5 a month. You teach Isaiah reading, writing, arithmetic, history, whatever you can. In return, you've got a roof over your head and food on your table for as long as you need it. And the town, the gossip. I can't protect you from talk. but I can tell you that my ranch is 5 miles outside of town, and most folks here are too lazy to ride that far in winter just to judge. You'd be left alone for the most part." Clara considered. The offer was reasonable, more than reasonable given her circumstances. The isolation might even be welcome after days of hostile stares and whispered comments. But there was something else. Something in Eli Dawson's eyes that spoke to something in her own. A recognition, perhaps. The look of someone who had learned to survive alone, who had built walls around themselves for protection. She understood that look. She wore it herself. "I accept," she said. Eli blinked as if he hadn't expected her to agree so quickly. "You're sure you haven't even seen the ranch?" "I'm sure." Clara extended her good hand. "When do I start?" Eli looked at her hand for a moment. Then slowly he took it. His grip was firm but careful, mindful of her injured arm. "Now, if you're ready, get your things from the boarding house. I'll wait here." Tick. An hour later, Clara was sitting in Eli Dawson's wagon, her single carpet bag at her feet, watching Copper Springs recede into the distance. The road was rough, the wagon jolted constantly, but Eli drove carefully, avoiding the worst of the ruts. Neither of them spoke for the first mile. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy with the weight of two strangers trying to figure each other out. Finally, Eli glanced at her. "That arm giving you trouble?" "It's manageable. Doc Chen's good. Best doctor I've ever known. If he says it'll heal, it'll heal." "You trust him?" "With my life." Eli's voice was quiet. "Sam and I, we understand each other. Both of us know what it's like to be outside." Clara nodded. She was beginning to understand that too. They rode in silence for another mile before Eli spoke again. "Isaiah's going to have questions. About you, about why you're here. He's not used to strangers." "What should I tell him?" "The truth. He respects honesty." Eli's hands tightened on the reins. "He's been hurt by people who weren't honest with him. I won't have that happen again." "I understand." The road crested a small hill, and suddenly Clara could see the ranch spread out below them, a modest house, a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and countless sheep dotting the snow-covered pastures. "Sheep," she said, surprised. "I expected cattle." "Cattle are easier to raise, but harder to keep. Sheep are smarter than people think, and their wool keeps bringing money even in bad years." Eli guided the wagon down the hill. "Also, running sheep instead of cattle is one more thing that sets me apart from men like Hargrove. He's cattle through and through. Considers sheep beneath him. And that bothers him. Everything about me bothers him." Eli's voice was flat. "I'm the wrong color. I own land he wants and I refuse to sell. In Silas Hargrove's world, that makes me an enemy." The wagon pulled up in front of the house, and before Eli could help Clara down, the front door burst open and a boy came running out. He was tall for 14, with his uncle's gray eyes and his mother's lighter skin. His face was open and eager, and he skidded to a stop in front of the wagon, staring at Clara with undisguised curiosity. "Uncle Eli." "You brought someone?" "Isaiah, this is Miss Whitfield. She's going to be staying with us for a while, teaching you your lessons." Isaiah's eyes went wide. "A real teacher. For me?" "For you." Eli climbed down from the wagon and began unhitching the horses. "Help Miss Whitfield inside. Carefully, she's got an injured arm." Isaiah immediately offered Clara his hand, his face serious with responsibility. "I'll be real careful, ma'am. I promise." Clara let him help her down, touched by his earnestness. "Thank you, Isaiah." "You're welcome, ma'am." He picked up her carpet bag before she could reach for it. "Uncle Eli says you're from Philadelphia. I read about Philadelphia in a book once. Is it really as big as they say?" "Bigger, probably." "Wow." Isaiah led her toward the house, talking all the while. "I've never been anywhere except here, and Copper Springs. Uncle Eli says maybe someday we can go to San Francisco, but I don't know. He's real busy with the sheep." The inside of the house was modest, but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen, a small hallway leading to bedrooms. Books were stacked on every available surface, and Clara felt something warm kindle in her chest at the sight. "You have quite a collection," she said. "Uncle Eli buys them whenever he can, from travelers, from mail order, from anywhere." Isaiah's voice was proud. "He says books are the most important thing a person can own." "Your uncle is a wise man." Isaiah beamed. Eli came in a few minutes later, stomping snow off his boots. "Isaiah, show Miss Whitfield to the spare room. Make sure there's enough wood for the stove." "Yes, sir." The boy bounded off down the hallway, and Clara found herself alone with Eli in the warm, book-filled room. "He's wonderful," she said quietly. "Your nephew. He's the best thing in my life." Eli's face softened when he spoke of the boy. "Whatever else happens, I want him to have chances I never had. Education, options, a future that isn't limited by the color of his skin. I'll do my best for him. I promise you that." Eli met her eyes, and for a moment his guard dropped. She saw the exhaustion there, the loneliness, the fierce love for his nephew that drove everything he did. "Thank you," he said, "for coming, for taking a chance. Thank you for offering one." They stood there in the firelight, two strangers bound together by circumstance and need not knowing yet what they would become to each other. But something had begun. In the frozen heart of Wyoming territory, in a house full of books and hope, something new was taking root. And neither of them would ever be the same. The first week at Eli's ranch passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Clara learned the rhythms of the household breakfast at dawn before Eli headed out to tend the sheep lessons with Isaiah through the morning. A simple lunch, more lessons in the afternoon, and supper together as the winter darkness fell early and complete. Isaiah was everything Eli had promised and more. The boy devoured knowledge like a starving man at a feast, asking questions faster than Clara could answer them, reading late into the night by candlelight until Eli would come and gently take the book from his hands. "You'll ruin your eyes," Eli would say, and Isaiah would protest, and the argument would repeat itself the next night and the night after that. Clara found herself looking forward to these small domestic moments more than she'd expected. After years of living alone in Philadelphia, eating solitary meals in her rented room, the simple pleasure of sharing a table with others felt like a luxury. Her arm was healing well. Dr. Chen had ridden out after the first week to check on her, pronouncing himself satisfied with her progress. The swelling had gone down, and though she still couldn't use the arm fully, she could manage most tasks with care. "Another 2 weeks," Dr. Chen said, rewrapping the binding. "Then we'll see about removing this." "Thank you, doctor." "Sam," he corrected with a smile. "Out here, we don't stand on formality." After he'd gone, Clara found Eli standing by the window watching the doctor's horse disappear down the road. "He's a good man," Clara said. "The best I know." Eli turned from the window. "He saved Isaiah's life when the boy was 8. Fever that should have killed him. Sam stayed 3 days and nights, wouldn't leave until the fever broke. That's why you trust him. That's why I'd die for him." Eli's voice was matter-of-fact, stating a simple truth. There aren't many people in this world worth dying for. Sam's one of them. Clara wondered, not for the first time, what kind of life had shaped this man. What sorrows had carved those lines around his eyes? What joys had taught him to smile so rarely, but so genuinely when he did? She was beginning to understand that Eli Dawson was far more complex than he first appeared. The quiet rancher who spoke little and worked hard was also a man who read philosophy by firelight, who had taught himself Latin from a battered textbook, who could quote Shakespeare with the same ease he discussed sheep breeding. "Where did you learn so much?" she asked him one evening after Isaiah had gone to bed. They were sitting by the fire a comfortable distance apart, each with a book in hand. "You're more educated than most professors I met in Philadelphia." Eli was quiet for a moment. "My mother taught me. She believed education was the one thing no one could take from you. No matter what else they stripped away your dignity, your rights, your place in society, they couldn't reach inside your head and steal what you'd learned. She sounds remarkable. She was. Eli's voice softened. She was born a slave in Virginia, escaped north when she was 16, taught herself to read from stolen newspapers and discarded books. By the time I was born, she could read and write better than most white folks. He paused. She used to say that words were weapons, and she was determined to arm her children. Your father, Irish immigrant, came over during the famine. They met in Kansas after the war, when everything was chaos and the old rules didn't apply. A shadow crossed Eli's face. The new rules caught up with them eventually. Clara heard what he wasn't saying. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But his hands had tightened on his book, and she knew the wounds were still fresh beneath the surface. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Clara found herself studying Eli's profile in the flickering light, the strong jaw, the thoughtful furrow of his brow, the way his eyes reflected the flames. He was handsome. She'd noticed that the first day, but she'd pushed the observation aside as irrelevant. Now, in the quiet intimacy of the firelit room, she let herself acknowledge it fully. And then, she pushed it aside again, because acknowledging it led to thoughts she couldn't afford to have. Tell me about Philadelphia, Eli said, breaking the silence. What was it like growing up there? Clara considered the question. Crowded, busy, full of people rushing from one place to another, never stopping to look at each other. She smiled slightly. My father used to say that cities were places where 1,000 people could live on the same street and never know each other's names. Sounds lonely. It was sometimes. But there was also possibility. The sense that anything could happen, that your life could change in a moment. She laughed quietly. I suppose that's what brought me here. The belief that change was possible. And has it been what you expected? Nothing has been what I expected. Clara met his eyes. But I'm beginning to think that might not be a bad thing. Something passed between them. In that moment, a recognition, a connection that went beyond words. Eli looked away, first clearing his throat. It's late. You should rest. You're right. Clara stood gathering her shawl around her shoulders. Good night, Eli. Good night, Clara. She was halfway to her room when his voice stopped her. Clara. She turned. He was still sitting by the fire, not looking at her. I'm glad you came here, he said quietly. Isaiah's learned more in 2 weeks than I could have taught him in a year. But more than that, I'm glad for the company. It's been a long time since this house felt like a home. The words wrapped around her heart and squeezed. I'm glad too, she whispered, and then she fled to her room before she could say anything else. That night she lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the feelings churning inside her. She had come here for shelter, for a temporary solution to a temporary problem. She had not come here to feel her heart quicken every time Eli walked into a room. She had not come here to fall no. She stopped the thought before it could complete itself. She was not falling anything. She was grateful, that was all. Grateful for his kindness, his hospitality, his willingness to help a stranger. Gratitude. That's all it was. She almost believed it. The second week brought their first real crisis. Clara was in the middle of a history lesson with Isaiah when they heard shouting from outside. She rushed to the window to see Eli running toward the far pasture, where a commotion was stirring up the sheep. Stay here, she told Isaiah, but the boy was already grabbing his coat. That's wolves, ma'am. I know the sound. Uncle Eli needs help. Before Clara could stop him, Isaiah was out the door. She followed her healing arm, protesting, as she struggled into her own coat. The scene in the pasture was chaos. 3 wolves had gotten through a gap in the fence and were terrorizing the flock. Sheep scattered in all directions, bleating in terror. Eli was trying to drive the wolves back with a rifle, but they were circling, looking for an opening. Isaiah grabbed a pitchfork from the barn and ran toward his uncle. Clara, unarmed and half-healed, could do nothing but watch in horror as one of the wolves lunged at Eli. The rifle cracked. The wolf fell, but the other two were still circling, emboldened by the chaos. "Isaiah, get back!" Eli shouted, but the boy was already there, jabbing at a wolf that had gotten too close to a downed sheep. Clara didn't think. She ran to the barn, found a length of rope, and did the only thing she could think of. She started making noise. Banging on the barn wall, shouting, creating enough commotion to confuse the animals. It worked. The wolves, startled by the new threat, hesitated just long enough for Eli to get off 2 more shots. One wolf fell. The other fled into the woods, disappearing into the snow-covered trees. Silence fell over the pasture, broken only by the panicked bleating of the sheep. Eli stood for a moment, breathing hard, then turned to look at Clara. His expression was unreadable. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Clara was shaking, she realized. The rush of fear and adrenaline was fading, leaving her weak-kneed and trembling. Eli crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine. Just—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Her legs gave out, and suddenly Eli's arms were around her, holding her up. "Easy," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "I've got you. You're all right." Clara leaned into him without thinking, her face pressed against his chest. He smelled of wool and wood smoke, and something else, something uniquely him. His heart was pounding as hard as hers. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," Eli said quietly. "Unarmed with a healing arm, and you ran into a wolf attack to make noise. It was all I could think of." It worked. His arms tightened around her briefly, then released. He stepped back, his expression carefully neutral. "Thank you. You may have saved Isaiah's life." Isaiah appeared at their side, his face flushed with excitement and fear. "That was amazing, Miss Whitfield. You scared them off." "I made a lot of noise. Your uncle did the real work." "You worked together," Isaiah said earnestly. "That's what Uncle Eli always says. That's how you survive out here. Working together." Eli's eyes met Clara's over his nephew's head. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of what had just happened, of the barrier they'd crossed by touching, by holding each other even briefly. "Come on," Eli said, his voice gruff. "We need to count the sheep and fix that fence before nightfall." They worked together for the rest of the afternoon. Clara couldn't do much with her arm, but she held tools for Eli, kept track of the count, and made sure Isaiah stayed safe. By the time they finished, the sun was setting, and they were all exhausted. Supper that night was quiet. Isaiah fell asleep at the table halfway through his meal, and Eli carried him to bed without waking him. When he returned to the main room, Clara was standing by the fire, staring into the flames. "He's out cold," Eli said. "Won't wake till morning." "It's been a long day." "It has." Eli came to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Clara, about earlier? You don't have to say anything." "Yes, I do." He turned to face her, and his expression was more open than she'd ever seen it. "When you ran out there into danger without even thinking about yourself, I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time." Clara's heart was pounding. "Eli, I know this isn't appropriate. I know I'm not." He stopped, shook his head. "I know what I am, and what you are, and I know what the world thinks of people like me wanting people like you. But I can't seem to make myself stop wanting it anyway." The confession hung in the air between them. Clara could barely breathe. "What do you want, Eli?" "I want—" His voice broke. "I want to not be alone anymore. I want to come home to someone who sees me not what I am, but who I am. I want—" He stopped again, his hands clenching at his sides. "It doesn't matter what I want. You came here for a job, not for this." Clara reached out and touched his face. It was the first time she'd initiated contact between them, and she felt him freeze under her fingers. "What if I want this too?" Eli's eyes searched hers. "You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what it would cost you." "I know exactly what I'm saying. And I know exactly what it would cost." Clara's voice was steady, even though her heart was racing. "I've lost everything, Eli. My parents, my home, my uncle, my future. I came here with nothing, expecting nothing. And then I found you, this house, Isaiah, this life. And for the first time in years I feel like I belong somewhere. People will talk. They'll say things about you that you can't unhear. Let them talk. Hargrove will use it against both of us. Hargrove can go to hell." A sound escaped Eli, something between a laugh and a sob. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "I've been told that before." Clara stepped closer. "I'm not asking you to marry me, Eli. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I'm just asking you to stop pretending that there's nothing between us, because I know you feel it too." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he raised his hand and covered hers where it still rested on his cheek. "I feel it," he said softly. "God help me, I feel it." He leaned down and his lips brushed hers, gentle questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She rose up to meet him, and the kiss deepened into something that made her forget the cold, forget the danger, forget everything except the warmth of his mouth and the strength of his arms as they wrapped around her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eli rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he said quietly. "This is going to bring us nothing but trouble." "I don't care." "I care. I care about you too much to let you ruin yourself for me. That's my choice to make, not yours." Eli pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were full of something she couldn't name. "Clara Whitfield, you are the most infuriating, the most beautiful, the most impossibly stubborn woman I have ever known." "Is that a compliment?" "It's the truth." He released her and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "We need to be careful. Not because I'm ashamed, God, no, never that, but because there are people who would hurt you to get to me. Hargrove, for one. He's been waiting for something he can use, and this us would be exactly what he needs." Clara nodded slowly. "So what do we do?" "For now, nothing. We go on as we have been. You teach Isaiah, I work the ranch, and we—" He paused, a small smile crossing his face. "We figure out what this is, slowly, carefully, without giving Hargrove or anyone else ammunition. And if someone finds out anyway, then we deal with it, together." Eli reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "That's what this is, Clara. Whatever it becomes, it's us dealing with things together. No more alone." "No more alone," she repeated, and the words felt like a promise. That night, Clara lay in her bed and listened to the wind howling outside. She thought about everything that had happened, the wolves, the danger, the kiss. She thought about Eli's words, his fears, his hopes. She thought about what her life had been 3 weeks ago, stepping off a stagecoach into a blizzard, discovering her uncle was dead, facing the prospect of poverty and desperation. And now, she was here in a warm house full of books, with a boy who made her laugh, and a man who made her heart race. She was here, and despite everything she was happy. Whatever came next, she would face it. Because for the first time in years, she had something worth fighting for. The third week brought Eli's weekly trip to town, and Clara insisted on accompanying him. "It's not safe," Eli argued. "People will see us together. People already know I'm staying here. Hiding isn't going to change that." Clara pulled on her coat. "Besides, I need supplies. Books for Isaiah, thread for mending a few personal items. Unless you'd prefer to shop for ladies' necessities yourself." Eli's face reddened slightly. "Fine. But we go in separately and we leave separately. There's no need to give anyone more to talk about." The ride into town was cold, but clear. They talked about Isaiah's progress, about the sheep, about everything except what had happened between them 3 nights ago. By unspoken agreement, they were being careful, taking things slowly. But Clara caught Eli watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, and she knew her own eyes lingered on him the same way. Copper Springs was busier than it had been on Clara's first visit. The general store was crowded with ranchers stocking up before a predicted storm, and Clara had to wait her turn to be served. She was examining a bolt of fabric when a shadow fell across her. "Miss Whitfield, what a pleasant surprise!" Clara turned to find Silas Hargrove smiling down at her with those cold, pale eyes. "Mr. Hargrove, I heard you'd taken a position at the Dawson Ranch." His voice was smooth, conversational, but there was something underneath that made Clara's skin prickle. "I have to admit I was surprised. A woman of your education and breeding working for well. For a man who treats me with respect and pays me fairly. Yes, how shocking." Hargrove's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "I was going to say, working for a sheep rancher. Such a step down from what I offered. I'm content where I am." "Are you?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Because I've been hearing things, Miss Whitfield. Interesting things about the nature of your arrangement with Mr. Dawson." Clara's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "People talk. It doesn't make what they say true." "No, but it does make it damaging. Reputation is everything out here, Miss Whitfield. A woman without reputation is—" He paused as if searching for the word. "Vulnerable. Is that a threat?" "It's advice. The same advice I gave you before." Hargrove straightened, adjusting his coat. "My offer still stands. Leave the Dawson Ranch, come work for me, and all of this unpleasantness goes away. I'm a powerful man in this town. I can protect you in ways that Eli Dawson never could. And if I refuse, then you'll discover just how difficult life in Copper Springs can become for someone without friends." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Miss Whitfield. I hope you'll give my offer serious consideration." After he'd gone, Clara stood frozen among the bolts of fabric, her hands trembling. She had known Hargrove was dangerous. Eli had warned her. Hannah had warned her. But this was the first time she'd felt the full weight of that danger directed at her. She finished her shopping quickly and found Eli waiting by the wagon on the outskirts of town as they'd agreed. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately reading her face. "Hargrove. He approached me in the store." Eli's expression went dark. "What did he say?" "He made his offer again, and he made it clear that refusing would have consequences." "Son of a—" Eli stopped himself, his jaw tight. "I knew this was a mistake. I knew bringing you here would put you in his sights." "I was already in his sights, Eli, from the moment I arrived in this town with no money and no protection. At least now I have somewhere to go and someone to stand with." "Someone who can't protect you." The words came out bitter harsh. "That's what he's counting on. He knows I can't fight him, not directly. He's got money power connections. All I've got is a sheep ranch and a reputation that makes half the town cross to the other side of the street when they see me coming." Clara put her hand on his arm. "You've got more than that. You've got integrity. You've got people who believe in you, Sam, Hannah, Maggie at the boarding house. And you've got me." Eli looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Some of the tension left his shoulders. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why would you choose this? Choose me? You could go back east, start over somewhere no one knows you. You don't have to stay here and fight battles that aren't yours." "They are mine," Clara said firmly. "The moment I decided to stay at your ranch, they became mine. The moment I—" She stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. "The moment you what?" "The moment I started caring about you, about Isaiah, about this life." She met his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, Eli. Not because Hargrove threatens me, and not because people talk. The only way I leave is if you ask me to." Eli was silent for a long moment. Then he reached up and covered her hand with his. "I won't ask you to leave," he said quietly. "God knows I should. But I won't." They drove back to the ranch as the first flakes of a new storm began to fall. The wind was picking up, and by the time they reached the house, The sky had turned the color of lead. "Gonna be a bad one," Eli said, eyeing the clouds. "We might be snowed in for days." "Then it's a good thing I bought extra supplies." Isaiah met them at the door, his face alight with excitement. "Uncle Eli, Miss Whitfield, there's someone here." Clara's stomach dropped. "Who?" "A lady. She came about an hour ago. Said she was looking for shelter from the storm." Eli and Clara exchanged a look. Visitors at the ranch were rare, and visitors seeking shelter from a storm that had only just begun were rarer still. They found the visitor sitting by the fire wrapped in a heavy traveling cloak. When she turned at their entrance, Clara recognized her immediately. Hannah Lee. "Hannah?" Clara hurried to her side. "What are you doing here? Is everything all right?" Hannah's face was pale and drawn. "No," she said quietly. "Everything is very much not all right." She looked at Eli. "I came to warn you. Hargrove knows." Eli went still. "Knows what?" "About your parents. About the land deed." Hannah's voice was barely above a whisper. "He's found a way to take your ranch, Eli, and he's going to do it legally." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside the wind howled, and the snow began to fall in earnest. And Clara understood with a cold certainty that everything was about to change. Hannah's words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Clara watched Eli's face transform, the color draining from his skin, his jaw going tight with a fear he couldn't quite hide. "What do you mean legally?" Eli's voice was controlled, but Clara could hear the tremor beneath the surface. Hannah pulled a folded paper from inside her cloak. "I found this in Sam's office. Hargrove's lawyer brought it by for Sam to witness, but Sam refused. He kept a copy and showed me." She handed the paper to Eli. "It's a claim against your land deed. Hargrove says your father never had legal right to purchase this property because he was black." Eli finished the sentence flatly. He didn't look at the paper. "The territorial laws in '68, I know about them." "Eli, what is she talking about?" Clara stepped closer, her heart pounding. "When my parents bought this land, there were laws restricting property ownership for people of color. My father used my mother's name on the deed because she was white, Irish immigrant legally able to own property." Eli's voice was hollow. "It was the only way. Everyone did it back then." "But that was 14 years ago," Clara said. "Surely those laws have changed?" "They have, but Hargrove's found a loophole." Hannah pointed to a section of the document. "He's claiming the original deed was fraudulent because your mother signed under false pretenses that she wasn't really the head of household, that your father was the actual purchaser using her as a front. If he can prove fraud, the deed becomes void and the land reverts to territorial control. Which means Hargrove can buy it for pennies at a government auction," Eli finished. "He's been planning this, for years probably." Clara took the paper from his hands and read it quickly. The legal language was dense, but the intent was clear. Silas Hargrove was going to steal Eli's land, using the very laws that had been designed to oppress people like him. "Can he do this?" she asked. "Is there any way to fight it?" "With what?" Eli laughed bitterly. "I'd need a lawyer, and there isn't a lawyer within 100 miles who'd take my case against Hargrove. The man owns this territory. There has to be something." Clara's mind was racing. "What about the original paperwork? If we can prove your mother was legitimately the head of household—" "My mother's been dead for 14 years. Any witnesses who could testify to her status are either dead or scattered to the winds." Isaiah appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Uncle Eli, what's happening? Are we going to lose the ranch?" Eli crossed to his nephew and put his hands on the boy's shoulders. "I don't know yet, but whatever happens, we'll face it together. You understand?" Isaiah nodded, but his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Clara watched them, this man and this boy, who had lost so much already, who had built something beautiful out of nothing, and who now faced losing it all because of one man's greed and an unjust system. Something hardened inside her. She had spent her whole life being pushed around by circumstances, by loss, by forces beyond her control. She had come west looking for a new beginning, and instead she had found something worth fighting for. "Eli," she said, her voice steady. "Where are your mother's papers? Letters, documents, anything she might have saved." "There's a box. In the barn in the loft. I couldn't bear to keep them in the house after she died." "I need to see them. All of them." Eli looked at her with something like hope and something like fear. "Clara, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Hargrove isn't the only one who knows how to use paperwork as a weapon." The storm raged for 3 days. Wind howled around the house, snow piled up to the windowsills, and the world beyond the ranch disappeared into a wall of white. But inside, Clara worked. Eli had brought the box down from the barn before the storm hit full force. It was old, battered, filled with a lifetime of memories, letters, photographs, legal documents, personal papers. Clara spread everything across the kitchen table and began to sort. "What exactly are you looking for?" Eli asked on the first night watching her work. "I don't know yet, but Hargrove's claim is based on the idea that your mother wasn't really the head of household, that the purchase was fraudulent. If I can find evidence that she was legitimately independent, that she had her own income, her own standing, it might be enough to challenge his claim." She took in laundry, mending, whatever work she could find. "Did she keep records?" "My mother kept records of everything. She was—" Eli paused, his voice catching. "She was meticulous. Said a black woman in America couldn't afford to be careless about anything." Clara found the records on the second day. A small leather notebook filled with careful entries in a neat, educated hand. Income and expenses meticulously documented. Dates, amounts, names of clients. "Eli, look at this." He came to stand behind her close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "What is it?" "Your mother's account book. She documented everything, every penny she earned, every penny she spent. And look here." Clara pointed to an entry near the front. "This is dated 3 months before the land purchase. She lists her savings as $127.43. That's more than enough to have made the down payment on the land. So this proves she had independent means. She wasn't just a front for your father, she was a contributing partner with her own money." Clara flipped through more pages. "And here she lists herself as proprietor laundry services. She had her own business, Eli. She was exactly what the deed claimed her to be, an independent head of household." Eli stared at the notebook like it was a holy relic. "My mother always said her records would save us someday. I thought she was just being—" He stopped, shook his head. "I should have known better than to doubt her." "This might not be enough on its own," Clara cautioned. "We'd need someone to verify it, to testify that these records are legitimate. Sam might know. He was here back then, not as a doctor, but working at the general store. He might remember my mother, her business. Then we talk to Sam as soon as the storm breaks." Hannah, who had been trapped at the ranch by the blizzard, came to look at the documents. "This is good," she said slowly. "But Hargrove has money to buy judges, to bribe officials. Even with proof, you might not get a fair hearing. Then we make it impossible for him to hide." Clara's mind was working furiously. "If we can get this information to enough people, the territorial newspaper officials in Cheyenne, anyone with authority who isn't in Hargrove's pocket, he won't be able to bury it." "That's dangerous," Eli said quietly. "You're talking about going to war with the most powerful man in the territory. He started this war, not us. I'm just suggesting we fight back." Eli looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, a smile crossed his face, the first real smile she'd seen from him since Hannah's arrival. "You're something else, Clara Whitfield. You know that I've been told." On the third night of the storm, with the wind still howling outside and the fire burning low, Clara and Eli sat together in the main room while Isaiah and Hannah slept. The account book lay between them on the small table, a weapon they were learning to wield. "Can I ask you something?" Eli said quietly. "Anything." "Why are you doing this? Fighting this hard for something that isn't yours?" Clara considered the question. "When I was 8 years old, my father took me to see Independence Hall in Philadelphia. He showed me the room where the Declaration of Independence was signed, and he said something I've never forgotten. He said, 'This country was built on a promise that all men are created equal. The promise has been broken 1,000 times, but that doesn't mean we stop fighting for it. That's what being American means, fighting for the promise.'" Eli was silent. "This land is yours," Clara continued. "You and your family built it from nothing worked, it bled for it. Hargrove wants to take it because he's greedy and because he thinks the law will let him get away with it. But the law isn't supposed to work that way. And if we just let him win without fighting—" She shook her head. "Then the promise doesn't mean anything." "You really believe that the promise means something?" "I have to believe it. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" Eli reached across the table and took her hand. "You're the first person in a long time who's made me believe it might be true." "Eli, let me finish." His eyes were intense, burning with something that made Clara's breath catch. "I've spent my whole life being told what I can't have, what I don't deserve, what I'll never be allowed to want. And I accepted it mostly. I kept my head down, I worked hard, I tried to stay invisible. But then you showed up stubborn and beautiful, and so damn brave, and suddenly I'm wanting things I told myself I'd never want." "What things?" "Everything." His voice was raw. "I want everything with you, Clara. A life, a family, a future. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to grow old with you and watch Isaiah grow up and build something that lasts." He stopped, his hand tightening on hers. "But I can't ask you for that. Not when I might have nothing left to offer in a few weeks." Clara squeezed his hand back. "You're asking the wrong question." "What do you mean?" "You keep asking what you can offer me, what you have, what you don't have. But that's not what matters." She leaned closer. "What matters is who you are. And who you are, Eli Dawson, is the best man I've ever known." "Clara, I'm not finished." She smiled slightly. "You asked me why I'm fighting so hard for this. The truth is, I'm not fighting for the land. I'm not even fighting for the principle. I'm fighting for you. Because somewhere in the last few weeks, I fell in love with you, and I'm not going to stand by and watch everything you've built be destroyed." The words hung between them. Clara felt her heart pounding, waiting for his response. Eli stood slowly, pulling her up with him. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "Say it again," he whispered. "I love you." "Again." "I love you, Eli Dawson. Whatever happens, whatever comes, I love you." He kissed her. Then not the gentle questioning kiss from before, but something fierce and desperate and full of everything they'd been holding back. Clara wrapped her arms around him and kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring all her fear and hope and love into the moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Eli rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too," he said. "I think I've loved you since the moment you marched into that general store with your arm in a sling and your chin held high, looking like you could take on the whole world single-handed." Clara laughed through her tears. "I was terrified. You didn't show it. That's what got me. All that courage, all that determination." He pulled back to look at her. "Whatever happens with Hargrove, with the land, with any of it, you've already given me, more than I ever thought I'd have." "We're going to win this," Clara said fiercely. "We're going to beat him." "Maybe, maybe not, but we'll face it together." "Together," she agreed. The storm broke on the fourth morning. The sky cleared to a brilliant blue, and the world outside was transformed into a glittering white landscape. Eli and Clara stood on the porch looking out at the snow-covered ranch, at the sheep already emerging from their shelters to graze. "I need to ride into town," Eli said. "Talk to Sam, see what he remembers." "I'll come with you." "Clara." "Don't argue. We're in this together, remember?" Hannah appeared behind them, her bag packed. "I need to get back too. Sam will be worried." She hugged Clara tightly. "Be careful, both of you. Hargrove isn't going to take kindly to being challenged." "Let him come," Clara said. "We'll be ready." The ride into town was slow going through the deep snow, but they made it by midday. Sam Chen met them at his office door, his face grave. "I've been expecting you," he said. "Come in. There's something you need to know." Inside, Sam poured them both tea and sat down heavily. "Hargrove's been busy while you were snowed in. He's filed his claim with the territorial office. They're sending an official from Cheyenne to investigate." "When?" Eli asked. 3 weeks, maybe less depending on the weather." Clara pulled out the account book. "We found this, Eli's mother's records. They prove she had independent means when they purchased the land." Sam examined the book carefully, his expression changing as he read. This is remarkable. Mary was always meticulous, but this..." He looked up at Eli. "This might actually work." "Do you remember her? From back then?" "I remember her well. She was a regular customer at the store where I worked. Sharp as a tack, proud, never let anyone shortchange her." Sam's voice softened with memory. "She used to bring you in sometimes, Eli. You were just a little boy. She'd always buy you a peppermint stick if she'd had a good week." Eli's eyes were bright. "I remember. I could testify to her character, to her business dealings. It won't be easy, my word against Hargrove's lawyers, but it's something." Sam closed the book. "We're going to need more, though. More witnesses, more documentation. Something Hargrove can't dismiss or discredit." "What about the original purchase records?" Clara asked. "Would the territorial office have copies?" "Possibly. But getting access to them without Hargrove finding out?" Sam shook his head. "That man has eyes everywhere." "Then we need to move fast, before he realizes we're fighting back." They spent the next 2 weeks gathering evidence. Sam reached out to old contacts in Cheyenne. Clara wrote letters to everyone she could think of who might have information, former neighbors, business associates, anyone who might have known Mary Dawson. Eli visited other ranchers in the area, looking for anyone who remembered those early days. Some doors opened, many closed, but slowly, piece by piece, they built their case. Hargrove, meanwhile, was not idle. Word came that he'd been spreading rumors about Eli, old accusations, new lies, anything to damage his reputation before the official investigation. "He's saying I stole the land," Eli told Clara one evening, his voice flat with suppressed rage. "That my family were squatters who took advantage of the confusion after the war." "No one who knows you believes that." "Not everyone knows me, and Hargrove's got money to make people believe whatever he wants." The worst came 3 days before the territorial official was scheduled to arrive. Clara was in town picking up supplies when she heard the whispers. She saw the way people looked at her, some with pity, some with disgust, some with malicious satisfaction. "What's happened?" she asked Maggie at the boarding house. Maggie's face was grim. "Hargrove's put out a notice. It's posted on every public building in town." She handed Clara a printed sheet. Clara read it, and her blood ran cold. The notice accused Eli of moral corruption of maintaining an improper relationship with a white woman under his roof. It called for decent citizens to demand an investigation into the scandalous arrangement at the Dawson Ranch. It all but accused Clara of being Eli's kept woman. "That bastard," Clara whispered. "It gets worse." Maggie lowered her voice. "There's talk of running Eli out of town. Some of Hargrove's men have been stirring things up at the saloon, getting people riled." Clara's hands were shaking as she folded the notice and put it in her pocket. "I need to warn Eli." "Clara, wait." Maggie caught her arm. "If you go back there now, you'll be proving them right in their eyes. Maybe it would be better if you stayed in town until this blows over." "No." Clara's voice was steel. "I'm not abandoning him. Not now, not ever." She pulled free of Maggie's grip. "If they want a scandal, I'll give them one worth talking about." She rode back to the ranch as fast as the horse could carry her. Eli met her at the door, his face telling her he already knew. "Sam came by an hour ago," he said. "Showed me the notice." "Eli, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "Stop." He took her hands. "This isn't your fault. This is Hargrove trying to destroy us before we can fight back." His jaw tightened. "He knows about the evidence we've been gathering. This is his response. What do? We don't back down." Eli's eyes were fierce. "He wants us to run to hide, to give up. We're not going to give him the satisfaction." Isaiah appeared behind his uncle, his face set with a determination that made him look older than his 14 years. "I'm not scared of Silas Hargrove." "You should be," Eli said quietly. "He's a dangerous man, but being scared doesn't mean we stop fighting." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the moonlight on the snow, thinking about everything that had happened since she'd stepped off that stagecoach. She had come here with nothing. She had found love, found family, found purpose. And now it was all in danger of being torn away. But as she sat there in the darkness, something crystallized inside her. She thought about her father's words about the promise of America. She thought about Mary Dawson keeping meticulous records because she knew a black woman couldn't afford to be careless. She thought about Eli, who had built a life in the face of hatred and injustice, who still believed in the possibility of something better. They were all fighting for the same thing, she realized. Not just land or money or reputation. They were fighting for the right to exist, to love, to build something that would last. And Clara Whitfield was not going to let Silas Hargrove take that away. The territorial official arrived 2 days later. His name was Thomas Burke, and he was a small, precise man with spectacles and a manner that gave nothing away. He met with Hargrove. First protocol, he explained, but promised to hear Eli's side as well. The hearing was set for the following morning at the town hall. That night, Clara and Eli stood together on the porch, looking out at the land they might lose. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Eli said, "I want you to know that these last weeks, this time with you, it's been the happiest of my life." Clara leaned into him. "It's not over yet. We're going to fight and we're going to win. And if we don't, then we'll find somewhere else. Build something new. Together." Eli wrapped his arms around her. Together. The word was a promise, and as the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew cold, they held on to each other and waited for the dawn. The town hall was packed when Clara and Eli arrived. Every seat was taken, and people lined the walls 3 deep. Some faces were hostile, some curious, some carefully neutral. Clara spotted Hannah and Sam near the front, their presence a small comfort in the sea of uncertainty. Silas Hargrove sat at a table on the right side of the room, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. He looked calm, almost amused, like a man watching a game he knew he would win. Thomas Burke, the territorial official, sat at the center table with a stack of documents before him. His expression was unreadable. "Mr. Dawson," Burke said as Eli approached, "you understand the nature of these proceedings." "Yes, sir. I understand that Mr. Hargrove is trying to steal my land, using laws that were designed to oppress people like me." A murmur ran through the crowd. Hargrove's smile tightened slightly. "Let's keep this civil," Burke said. "Mr. Hargrove, please present your claim." Hargrove rose, smoothing his vest. "Thank you, Mr. Burke. The matter is quite simple. The land deed for the Dawson property was filed in 1868 under the name of Mary Dawson. However, our investigation has revealed that Mary Dawson was merely a front for her husband James Dawson, who was legally barred from owning property under territorial law at that time. He produced a stack of papers. We have affidavits from 3 witnesses who state that James Dawson was the one who negotiated the purchase that he paid the money, and that Mary Dawson was merely a name on paper. Clara's heart sank. She hadn't known about the witnesses. Furthermore, Hargrove continued, the original deed was witnessed by a man named William Carter, who has since admitted that he knew the purchase was fraudulent at the time, but chose to look the other way. He smiled. Mr. Carter is prepared to testify to this fact. Burke examined the papers. These are serious allegations. Mr. Dawson, do you have a response? Eli stood, and Clara could see the tension in his shoulders, the effort it took to keep his voice steady. My mother was not a front for anyone. She was an independent woman who ran her own business and saved her own money. The purchase was hers legally and rightfully. Do you have evidence to support this claim? I do. Eli nodded to Clara, who stood and carried the account book to Burke's table. This is my mother's personal record book. It documents her income and expenses from 1865 to 1882, including her savings at the time of the land purchase. Burke took the book and began to examine it. Hargrove leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. That book proves nothing, Hargrove said. Anyone could have written those entries. There's no way to verify their authenticity. Actually, there is. Clara stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. I've spent the last 2 weeks cross-referencing these records with other documentation. The names Mary Dawson listed as her clients, I wrote to them. Several wrote back, confirming that they did indeed employ her services during that period. She produced a stack of letters. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman of Kansas City, Mr. Thomas Reed of Denver, Mrs. Sarah Palmer, formerly of this very town. All confirmed that Mary Dawson provided laundry and mending services for payment during the years documented in this book. Burke took the letters, his eyebrows rising slightly. This is thorough. There's more. Clara turned to face the crowd. Dr. Sam Chen was working at the general store in 1868 when the Dawson family arrived. He remembers Mary Dawson clearly, her business, her independence, her character. He's prepared to testify. Sam stood his presence, drawing whispers from the crowd. I knew Mary Dawson for 14 years. She was one of the most capable, independent women I ever met. The suggestion that she was merely a front for her husband is an insult to her memory. Hargrove's face had gone red. Mr. Burke, this is ridiculous. The word of a Chinaman against documented affidavits. The word of a respected physician, Burke interrupted coolly, who has served this community for over a decade, continued Dr. Chen. Sam walked forward, his head held high. Mary Dawson came to my store every week. She paid for her purchases with money she earned herself. She negotiated prices, made decisions, and ran her household like any independent business owner. I witnessed her sign the land deed with my own eyes. She knew exactly what she was doing. And what about James Dawson? Burke asked. What was his role? James Dawson was a farmhand when I knew him. He worked for other ranchers in the area, earned wages, and contributed to the family income. But the land purchase was Mary's doing. She was the one who found the property, negotiated the price, and made the down payment. Sam's voice was steady. I remember because I was surprised a woman doing business like that was unusual. But Mary wasn't usual. She was exceptional. Burke made notes. Mr. Hargrove, you mentioned a witness, William Carter. Is he present? A man in the back of the room stood. He was old, stooped, with the look of someone who had lived a hard life. I'm Carter. Please come forward and give your testimony. Carter shuffled to the front of the room, not meeting anyone's eyes. Clara watched him carefully, noting the way his hands trembled, the way he kept glancing at Hargrove. Mr. Carter, Burke said, you witnessed the original land deed. What can you tell us about that transaction? Carter was silent for a moment. Then he looked at Hargrove, looked at Eli, and something shifted in his face. I lied, he said quietly. The room erupted. Hargrove shot to his feet. What? I lied in that affidavit. Carter's voice grew stronger. Mr. Hargrove's men came to me last month. They said if I didn't sign, they'd burn my house down. They said no one would believe a drunk old man anyway. "This is preposterous," Hargrove shouted. "The man is clearly demented." "I watched Mary Dawson sign that deed," Carter continued, ignoring him. "She signed it with her own hand, free and clear. James was there, but he didn't sign nothing. It was her land bought with her money. I knew it then, and I know it now." He turned to face Eli. "I'm sorry, son. I was scared, but I can't go to my grave with this on my conscience." The room was chaos. People were shouting, arguing, some pushing toward the front. Burke hammered on the table for order. "Enough!" His voice cut through the noise. "Everyone sit down, or I will clear this room." Slowly the crowd settled. Hargrove remained standing, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Mr. Burke, this is obviously a coordinated attack on my reputation. These people have conspired to—" "Mr. Hargrove, sit down." Burke's voice was ice. "I've heard quite enough from you for the moment." Hargrove sat, but his eyes were fixed on Clara with undisguised hatred. Burke spent several minutes reviewing the documents, the account book, the letters, the original deed. The silence in the room was suffocating. Finally, he looked up. "Based on the evidence presented, I find that the original land deed was properly executed and legally valid. Mary Dawson was an independent property owner with demonstrated means and standing. The claim that the purchase was fraudulent is not supported by credible evidence." Clara felt Eli's hand find hers and squeeze. "However," Burke continued, "this is not a court of law. My findings will be submitted to the territorial governor for final review. Until that review is complete, the property remains in dispute." "How long?" Eli asked. "Several weeks at least, possibly longer." It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. As the crowd began to disperse, Hargrove pushed his way toward them. His face was calm now, but his eyes were murderous. "You think you've won something," he said quietly, pitched for their ears alone. "You haven't. This is just the beginning." "I think it's the end," Clara replied. "Your witnesses recanted. Your claim is falling apart. The governor will see through you." "The governor owes me money." Hargrove smiled. "A lot of money. Do you really think he's going to rule against his biggest creditor?" He leaned closer. "I'm going to take that land, Dawson. And when I do, I'm going to burn every building to the ground. I'm going to salt the earth so nothing ever grows there again. And then I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happens to people who challenge Silas Hargrove." Eli stepped forward, putting himself between Hargrove and Clara. "You should leave now." "Or what?" "You'll hit me." "Go ahead. Give me a reason to have you arrested. Give me a reason to finish this tonight." "He won't." Clara put her hand on Eli's arm. "Because we're not going to give you anything. We're going to wait, and we're going to win, and there's nothing you can do about it." Hargrove stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "We'll see about that, Miss Whitfield. We'll see." He turned and walked out, his lawyers trailing behind him. That night, they didn't go back to the ranch. Sam insisted they stay in town at his office where he could keep watch. "Hargrove's not going to let this go," Sam said. "He's dangerous when he's cornered." "So we hide." Eli's voice was bitter. "We won today, and now we hide like criminals." "We're being smart," Clara said. "Living to fight another day." Isaiah was already asleep on a cot in the back room, exhausted from the day's tension. The adults sat around Sam's small stove drinking tea that had gone cold, none of them able to relax. "What happens now?" Hannah asked. "We wait," Clara said. "Burke sends his report to the governor. The governor makes a decision. Either we keep the land or—" She didn't finish. "Or Hargrove gets everything he wants." Eli finished for her. "And we lose everything." "You won't lose me." Clara took his hand. "Whatever happens, you won't lose me." Eli looked at her, his gray eyes full of emotion he couldn't put into words. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. You deserve everything good this world has to offer, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you get it." The sound came without warning, a whoosh of flame, a crackling roar that shattered the quiet of the night. Sam was at the window in an instant. "Fire," he said. "The livery stable." They ran outside. The stable was fully engulfed flames shooting into the night sky. People were pouring out of buildings, forming bucket brigades, shouting for water. "The horses!" someone screamed. "The horses are still inside." Eli was running before Clara could stop him. He plunged through the stable doors, disappearing into the smoke and flame. "Eli." Clara tried to follow, but Sam grabbed her arm. "You can't. You'll die in there." "He's in there. Let me go." The seconds stretched into eternity. Clara watched the flames, her heart stopping every time a beam cracked, every time a section of roof collapsed. Around her, people shouted and threw water and prayed. Then, Eli emerged leading 2 terrified horses through the smoke. His face was blackened, his clothes singed, but he was alive. Clara ran to him, throwing her arms around him despite the heat still radiating from his body. "You idiot! You could have died." "I'm fine." He was coughing, his voice rough. "I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. As the adrenaline faded, Clara saw him wince, saw him favoring his left side. She pulled back his coat and gasped. A burn ran from his ribs to his hip, angry and red, already blistering. "Sam!" she screamed. "Sam, he's hurt." What followed was a blur of activity. Sam treating the burn, Hannah bringing clean water and bandages, Isaiah appearing wide-eyed and terrified at his uncle's side. "I'm all right," Eli kept saying. "I'm all right." "You're lucky," Sam corrected grimly. "If you'd been in there 30 seconds longer." He didn't finish. Clara sat by Eli's side, holding his hand, refusing to let go even when Sam needed to work around her. Her mind was racing, putting pieces together. "The fire," she said suddenly. "It started in the livery stable. Eli's horse was there." Sam met her eyes. Understanding passed between them. "Hargrove," she whispered. "We can't prove it." "We don't need to prove it. We know." Eli was drifting the laudanum Sam had given him, pulling him towards sleep. But he heard her. His hand tightened on hers. "Don't," he mumbled. "Don't do anything stupid." "I won't," she lied. When Eli finally slept, Clara stood and walked to the window. The fire was out now, the stable a smoking ruin. A crowd still milled in the street, talking, speculating. "Clara." Hannah came to stand beside her. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Silas Hargrove just made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "He showed his hand. He showed everyone in this town exactly what kind of man he is." Clara's voice was steel. "And now I'm going to make sure they never forget it." The next morning, Clara went to see Maggie O'Brien. "I need to talk to the women of this town," she said without preamble. "All of them. Can you help me?" Maggie studied her for a long moment. "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to do what women have always done when men fail them. I'm planning to take matters into my own hands." A slow smile spread across Maggie's face. "I've been waiting 30 years for someone to say those words. Come in, child. Let's make some plans." By noon, Clara had met with a dozen women ranchers' wives, shopkeepers, laundresses, even some of the girls from the saloon. She told them about Hargrove's threats about the fire, about what he planned to do to Eli's land. "He thinks he can do whatever he wants because he's rich and we're not," Clara said. "He thinks we'll be too scared to fight back. He thinks we'll just accept whatever he decides to do." "What can we do?" asked Mrs. Patterson, wife of the blacksmith. "He owns half the town. He owns buildings and businesses. He doesn't own us." Clara leaned forward. "Every one of you has a husband, a brother, a son who owes money to Hargrove, or works for Hargrove, or depends on Hargrove in some way. He uses that to control them. But he can't control what we know, what we say, what we tell each other." You're talking about gossip, another woman said. I'm talking about truth. The truth about who Silas Hargrove really is and what he's really done. Clara pulled out a sheet of paper. I've written it all down. The threats, the bribery, the witness tampering, the fire. I want to send copies to every newspaper in the territory. I want to send copies to the governor, to officials in Washington, to anyone who will listen. He'll destroy you, Maggie said quietly. You know that. Maybe. But he won't be able to hide anymore. Everyone will know who he is. And men like Hargrove, they need shadows to work in. They need people to look away. If we shine enough light, he won't have anywhere to hide. The women were silent, exchanging glances. Clara could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear she had felt when Hargrove first threatened her, when she realized how much power he wielded. But she could see something else too, a spark of anger, a flicker of hope. I'll help, Mrs. Patterson said finally. My sister lives in Cheyenne. She knows people at the newspaper there. I'll help too, said another woman. My brother works at the telegraph office. He can send messages without Hargrove knowing. One by one they volunteered. Not everyone, some were too afraid, and Clara didn't blame them, but enough. Enough to start. Thank you, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you all. Maggie squeezed her hand. Don't thank us yet. The hard part is just beginning. Over the following days, letters went out. Telegrams were sent. The story of Silas Hargrove spread beyond Copper Springs, beyond Wyoming, reaching places and people he couldn't control. And the responses began to come back. A newspaper in Cheyenne wanted more details. An official in the territorial government asked for evidence. A church group in Denver offered to send representatives to investigate. Hargrove tried to stop it. He fired employees whose wives were involved. He called in debts. He spread his own counter-stories, painting Clara as a troublemaker, Eli as a criminal. But it was too late. The truth was out, spreading like the fire that had consumed the livery stable, impossible to contain, impossible to control. Clara was in Sam's office, helping to tend Eli's healing burns, when Thomas Burke returned to town. Miss Whitfield, he said, removing his hat. Mr. Dawson, I have news from the governor. Eli sat up, wincing at the pull of his healing skin. What kind of news? Burke's face gave nothing away. The governor has reviewed my report along with additional correspondence that has come to his attention. He has made his decision regarding the land dispute. Clara held her breath. The claim against the Dawson property has been dismissed. The original deed stands. The land belongs to Elijah Dawson, free and clear. For a moment, no one moved. Then Clara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and threw her arms around Eli. We won, she whispered. We won. There's more, Burke said. The governor has asked me to inform you that an investigation is being opened into Mr. Hargrove's business practices. Several of his recent land acquisitions are being reviewed for possible fraud. What about the fire? Eli asked. The witnesses, he threatened. Those matters are being referred to the territorial marshal. I can't promise anything, but... Burke allowed himself a small smile. Mr. Hargrove may find the coming months rather difficult. After Burke left, Clara and Eli sat together in silence, letting the reality sink in. It's over, Eli said finally. It's really over. No. Clara took his hand. It's just beginning. He looked at her, a question in his eyes. We have the land, she said. We have each other. We have Isaiah and Sam and Hannah and all the people who stood with us. She smiled. Now we build. Now we make something that lasts. Eli raised their joined hands to his lips and kissed her fingers. Marry me. What? Marry me, Clara Whitfield. Tomorrow, next week, whenever you want. Just say yes. Clara laughed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, of course, yes. Eli pulled her close, ignoring the pain in his side, and kissed her like they had all the time in the world. Because now, finally, they did. The news of Hargrove's defeat spread through Copper Springs like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew the Dawson land was safe. The investigation was underway, and the most powerful man in the territory had been brought low by a schoolteacher with a healing arm and a rancher the town had tried to ignore for years. Clara woke in the small room at Sam's office, her hand still intertwined with Eli's. He was watching her, his gray eyes soft in the early morning light. "You're staring," she murmured. "I'm memorizing." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I want to remember exactly how you look right now. The woman who saved everything I have." "We saved it together." "No." Eli shook his head. "I would have given up. After the fire, after Hargrove's threats, I was ready to walk away. Take Isaiah and leave, start over somewhere else." His voice caught. "You wouldn't let me." Clara sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her shoulder. Her arm had healed well over the past weeks, but it still ached in the cold. "I couldn't let him win. Not after everything your mother built, everything you fought for." "It wasn't about the land for you, was it?" "No." She met his eyes. "It was about you. It was always about you." Eli pulled her close, careful of his healing burns, and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, Clara Whitfield, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it." "You already are," she whispered. "You always were." They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, letting the peace of the morning wash over them. After so many weeks of fear and fighting, the quiet felt almost strange. A knock at the door interrupted them. Isaiah's voice came through the wood. "Uncle Eli, Miss Clara Maggie's here. She says there's something you need to see." They dressed quickly and emerged to find Maggie standing in Sam's front room, her face flushed with cold and excitement. "You need to come to the main street," she said. "Now." "What's happening?" Clara asked. Maggie just smiled. "You'll see." They followed her through the snowy streets, Clara's hand in Eli's, Isaiah bouncing ahead of them with barely contained energy. As they turned onto the main street, Clara stopped dead. A crowd had gathered, not an angry mob, not curious onlookers, but something else entirely. Women stood in clusters talking and laughing. Men tipped their hats as Eli passed. Children pointed and whispered. And in front of the general store, a hand-painted sign had been hung. "Welcome home, Dawsons." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "Maggie, what is this?" "This is what happens when good people stop being afraid." Maggie's voice was thick with emotion. "Hargrove kept this town under his thumb for years. He made people believe they had to go along with him or lose everything. But you showed them another way. You showed them that standing together, telling the truth, fighting back, it works." Mrs. Patterson emerged from the crowd, her husband the blacksmith beside her. "We wanted to do something," she said, "to show you that you're not alone, that you never were." Others came forward, the telegraph operator's wife, the saloon girls, who had helped spread the word, ranchers, who had quietly supported Eli for years, but been too afraid to say so publicly. One by one, they offered their congratulations, their thanks, their promises of friendship. Eli stood rigid beside Clara, his face a mask of controlled emotion. She could feel him trembling, could see the tears he was fighting to hold back. "Say something," she whispered. He cleared his throat. "I don't—" His voice broke. He tried again. "For most of my life I've been told I don't belong, that I'm not welcome, that there's no place for people like me in towns like this." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "My mother used to tell me that home isn't a place. It's people. People who see you, who accept you, who stand with you when things get hard." He reached out and took Clara's hand, then Isaiah's. "I thought I'd never find that. I thought I'd spend my whole life on the outside looking in." His voice steadied. "I was wrong. And I want to thank you, all of you, for proving me wrong." The crowd erupted in applause. Someone started clapping, and then everyone was clapping, and Clara was crying, and Isaiah was grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. "There's one more thing," Maggie said when the applause died down. She produced a folded piece of paper. "This came from Cheyenne this morning. Official notice." Clara took the paper and read it aloud. "By order of the Territorial Governor, Silas Hargrove has been removed from all positions of public trust, pending investigation into charges of fraud, witness tampering, and arson. His assets have been frozen, and he has been ordered to appear before the Territorial Court within 30 days. The cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. That night there was a celebration at Maggie's boarding house. Food appeared from nowhere, pies and bread and roasted meat, bottles of cider and stronger things. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon there was music and dancing in the crowded front room. Clara stood by the window watching Eli dance awkwardly with Isaiah, both of them laughing at their own clumsiness. Sam was deep in conversation with Hannah, their heads close together in a way that made Clara smile. Maggie moved through the crowd like a general surveying her troops, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink. "You look happy." Clara turned to find Mrs. Patterson beside her. "I am happy. Happier than I've been in a long time." "You know it won't be easy." The older woman's voice was gentle but honest. "What you and Eli are doing, being together openly, there will still be people who don't accept it. People who will make your lives difficult. I know. And you're still going to do it." Clara watched Eli spin Isaiah in a clumsy circle, both of them nearly falling over. "Do you know what I was before I came here?" "Mrs. Patterson, I was a bookbinder in Philadelphia. I lived alone, worked alone, ate alone. I had no family. No friends, no future to speak of. I was invisible." She turned to face the older woman. "Then I came here, and everything fell apart. My uncle died. I got injured. I had nothing and no one. And somehow, in the middle of all that loss, I found more than I ever had before. I found purpose. I found family. I found love. And you're not willing to give that up." "I'm not willing to let fear take it away from me." Clara's voice was firm. "I've been afraid my whole life, afraid of loss, afraid of rejection, afraid of wanting things I might not get to keep. But being with Eli, fighting beside him, taught me something important." "What's that?" "That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding that something matters more than the fear." She smiled. "Eli matters more. Isaiah matters more. This life we're building, it matters more than anything anyone could say or do to us." Mrs. Patterson studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You're going to be good for this town, Clara Whitfield. Good for all of us." "I hope so." The older woman squeezed her hand and moved away. A moment later, Eli appeared at Clara's side, slightly out of breath from dancing. "Isaiah's teaching me to do do," he said. "I'm terrible at it." "I noticed." "You could come help." "I could." Clara slipped her hand into his. "But I'd rather stay here with you for a minute." They stood together watching the celebration, letting the joy of the moment wash over them. "I keep waiting to wake up," Eli said quietly. "Keep waiting for something to go wrong. Things will go wrong. They always do." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "But we'll face them together. That's the difference." "Together." He kissed the top of her head. "I like the sound of that." The wedding was small, just a handful of people gathered in Maggie's front room on a snowy afternoon 2 weeks later. Sam stood as Eli's witness, Hannah as Clara's. Isaiah held the rings with trembling hands and a smile that wouldn't quit. The minister was a circuit preacher passing through town, a weathered old man with kind eyes who didn't seem to care about the color of the groom's skin or the scandal of a white woman marrying a black man. "Marriage," he said in his rumbling voice, "is a covenant, a promise made between two people who choose each other over and over again every day for the rest of their lives." Clara looked at Eli standing across from her in his best shirt, his gray eyes bright with emotion. She thought about everything they'd been through, the blizzard, the wolves, the fire, the fight against Hargrove. She thought about all the battles still to come, all the challenges they would face. And she knew with absolute certainty that she would choose him again, every time, forever. "Do you, Elijah Dawson, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Eli's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "And do you, Clara Whitfield, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." The words came out strong, clear, certain. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you man and wife." The preacher smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Eli stepped forward, cupping Clara's face in his hands. "I love you," he whispered so softly only she could hear. "Every day. Forever." "Every day," she whispered back. "Forever." He kissed her, and the small crowd erupted in cheers. The reception was simple cake that Maggie had baked cider, that Sam had provided laughter and tears, and more joy than Clara had ever experienced. Isaiah made a toast that was half-prepared speech and half-improvised rambling, and everyone applauded anyway. "To Uncle Eli and Aunt Clara," he said, raising his glass of cider. "The bravest people I know. Thank you for teaching me that family isn't about blood, it's about choice." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks as she raised her own glass. Later, as the celebration wound down, she and Eli slipped outside. The snow had stopped falling and the sky had cleared to reveal a blanket of stars, more brilliant than anything Clara had ever seen in Philadelphia. "Look at that," she breathed. "I never knew there were so many stars." "City girl." Eli wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close against the cold. "This is nothing. Wait until summer when the Milky Way stretches from horizon to horizon." "Will you show me?" "I'll show you everything." He pressed his lips to her temple. "Every sunrise, every sunset, every storm, and every calm. I'll show you what this land looks like in spring when the wildflowers bloom and in autumn when the aspens turn gold. I'll show you everything I love about this place, and I'll watch you fall in love with it too." "I already love it." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Because you're here. Because Isaiah's here. Because this is home now." "Home." Eli smiled, and even in the darkness she could see the joy in his eyes. "I like that word. Get used to it. You're going to be hearing it a lot." They stood together in the snow, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by stars and silence, and the vast wild beauty of Wyoming territory. And for the first time in her life, Clara Whitfield, Clara Dawson, knew exactly where she belonged. Spring came slowly to Copper Springs. The snow melted, the creek swelled with runoff, and the first green shoots began to push through the thawing ground. Clara stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching Eli work with the sheep in the far pasture. Her arm had healed completely now, and she'd taken over most of the household duties, cooking, cleaning, managing the accounts. But she still taught Isaiah every morning, and he was flourishing under her instruction. "Aunt Clara." Isaiah appeared beside her, a book in his hands. "Can I ask you something? Always. Do you think I could go to a real school someday, like the ones you told me about in Philadelphia?" Clara's heart swelled. "I think you can do anything you set your mind to, Isaiah. And yes, I think you'll go to a real school someday. A good one. Even though I'm—" He stopped, his young face uncertain. "Even though you're brilliant and hardworking and deserve every opportunity in the world." Clara put her arm around him. "Yes, even though." Isaiah leaned into her embrace. "I'm glad you came here. I'm glad you stayed." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." That evening, as the sun set over the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold, and Rose, Clara, and Eli sat together on the porch. It had become their ritual, this quiet time at the end of each day, when they could simply be together without the demands of work or the intrusions of the outside world. "Letter came from Cheyenne today," Eli said, producing an envelope. "The territorial marshal." Clara tensed. "What does it say?" "Hargrove's trial date has been set. They want me to testify." Will you? Yes. Eli's voice was firm. I'm not afraid of him anymore, and I want to make sure he can never do to anyone else what he tried to do to us. Clara took his hand. We'll go together. Sam and Hannah too, probably. We'll stand up in that courtroom and tell the truth, and we'll watch justice finally catch up with him. You sound confident. I am confident. She squeezed his hand. We've already won the hard battle, Eli. We won the battle for this land, for our family, for each other. Hargrove's trial is just the last chapter of a story that's already over. Eli was silent for a moment, looking out at the land that had almost been taken from him. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come here, if you'd never gotten on that stagecoach? Sometimes. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. I'd probably still be in Philadelphia alone in my rented room binding books and wondering if there was more to life than just surviving. And instead, I'm here, with you, living a life I never imagined but wouldn't trade for anything. She smiled. I came here with a broken arm and a broken heart, looking for a home I didn't think I'd find. And I found you. You found us, Eli corrected. Isaiah and me and this whole crazy, beautiful life. I found everything. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had witnessed their first conversation, their first kiss, their wedding vows. I want to tell you something, Eli said finally. Something I've never told anyone. What is it? When I was young, after my mother died, I used to have this dream. The same dream over and over. I dreamed that I was standing in a field of wildflowers, and there was a woman beside me. I could never see her face, but I knew that she was mine, that we belonged to each other. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. And now I don't have that dream anymore. He turned to look at her, his gray eyes full of love. Because I don't need to dream it. It came true. Clara kissed him soft and sweet, pouring all her love into the gesture. Tell me about the wildflowers. They bloom in June, purple and yellow and white stretching all the way to the horizon. We'll have a picnic there, you and me and Isaiah. We'll lie in the grass and watch the clouds and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. Promise? Promise. They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, until Isaiah called them for supper, until the demands of daily life reclaimed them. But that moment, that quiet, perfect moment, stayed with Clara forever. Months later, on a warm June afternoon, they kept that promise. The three of them spread a blanket in a field of wildflowers, exactly as Eli had described, purple and yellow and white stretching to the horizon. Isaiah ran ahead, chasing butterflies, his laughter echoing across the open land. Clara lay back against Eli's chest, his arms wrapped around her, and looked up at the endless blue sky. Happy? He asked. Completely. No regrets. Not a single one. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the loss of her parents, the lonely years in Philadelphia, the desperate decision to come west, the accident that had injured her arm, the grief of finding her uncle dead. She thought about Hargrove's threats, and the fire, and the trial that had finally sent him to prison. She thought about all the pain and fear and uncertainty. And she thought about what had grown from that pain. A family, a home, a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger than ever. You know what I've learned, she said. What's that? That broken things can heal, that endings can become beginnings, that the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best ones if we're brave enough to keep going. Eli pressed a kiss to her hair. That's a lot of wisdom for a city girl. I had a good teacher. She turned to look up at him. A rancher with gentle hands who promised to take care of me when I had nothing and no one. Who kept that promise every single day. I always will, Eli said. Every day, forever. Isaiah came running back, his hands full of flowers. Look what I found. Can we press them in a book, Aunt Clara, so we can remember this day? Clara smiled, taking the flowers from his outstretched hands. That's a wonderful idea. We'll press them and keep them forever. Forever's a long time, Isaiah said seriously. Yes, Clara agreed, looking from the boy to the man she loved to the land that had become her home. It is, and we're going to spend every moment of it right here together. The sun was beginning to set, painting the wildflowers in shades of gold. Eli stood and helped Clara to her feet. Isaiah gathered the blanket. Together, the three of them walked back toward the ranch house, toward the life they had built and the future they would share. Behind them, the wildflowers swayed in the evening breeze, purple and yellow and white, stretching all the way to the horizon. Clara Whitfield Dawson had come to Wyoming with nothing but a broken arm and a broken dream. She had found love in the gentlest hands she'd ever known. She had found family in a boy who called her aunt and a man who called her wife. She had found home in a land as wild and beautiful as the life she'd built there. And she had found herself not the frightened, lonely woman who had stepped off that stagecoach into a blizzard, but someone stronger, braver, more complete. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one began with it.